Well, welcome everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's talk is sponsored by or brought to you by the Fallbrook Climate Action Team. And check out our website if you haven't been there at fallbrookclimateactionteam.org. And we have a list of past presentations on there, as well as some other resources and things. And what we are, if you're not familiar, is we are a nonpartisan group made up of volunteers who are concerned about climate change. And we want to keep our environment healthy for future generations. So what we do is bring you a presentation on the last Tuesday of each month on a different topic related to climate change. And tonight we are going to be talking about water resources. So before I get to that and before I introduce our speaker, I just have a very quick announcement that we are starting back up our Cut the Carbon program this fall. And what that is, if you're not familiar with it, many I know have already taken advantage of it in years past, but it is a tree planting program. And basically, if you donate $50 towards the Land Conservancy, the Fallbrook Land Conservancy, you will get a membership for the Fallbrook Land Conservancy plus a free tree.
Is this going here?
What's that?
Good.
Okay, had a little bit of feedback there. So anyway, $50, you get a membership to the Fallbrook Land Conservancy and a free tree that will be delivered to you. And Jackie Heineman, who many of you know, she's very, very knowledgeable about trees. She will actually come out to your home and help you decide what kind of tree to plant and where to plant it so that it's the most energy efficient. So for example, you might want to place a large tree where it's blocking the sun from hitting your house in the summer, but maybe it drops its leaves in the winter to let the sun through. Things like that. So she will help you decide where to put it. We'll order it, we'll pick it up and deliver it to your home. And then you are responsible for planting it because there are some liability concerns with our group planting it for you, but it's a great program and a way to get an extra tree as well as become a member of the Land Conservancy. So if you're interested in that, contact Tim O'Leary. He's not with us on tonight's call, but I will put his email in the chat function for everybody. So you can feel free to contact him. Okay, so with that, let's get to our speaker tonight. We're very excited to have Vic Nguyen on. He is the manager of the California Department of Water Resources, the Southern California region. And Vic, I believe I have your background correct, that you have a master's degree in civil engineering from UC Berkeley. I think that's correct.
Yeah, bachelor's from Cal, but master's from Sac State. Yeah.
Okay, very good, very good. And so obviously very well qualified to talk on tonight's topic. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Vic. And if you had anything else you wanted to add about your background, feel free.
Sure, that's fine. So I'm looking, I have two screens in front of me. I want to be able to look at you directly while I'm talking. So let me see if I can move my screen over real fast. If not, I'll just kind of, you know, am I looking at you sort of, if I do this? Is it good, okay? Okay. All right, so thanks for the introduction, Terry. I'm Vic Nguyen with the California Department of Water Resources. I manage the Southern Region Office. We're based in Glendale, California, and we, we're basically the face of the Department of Water Resources in Southern California. Our office covers 10 counties in Southern California, including LA, basically from Santa Barbara down to San Diego, east to Imperial Valley, and all the way up to Inyo, Mono, and Inyo County, and then kind of a horseshoe shape between those two, Santa Barbara and Inyo County. So today my talk is, the title is Managing Water in the West, and what I'm going to do is also to give you an update on the California drought and also the state response to the California drought. And maybe I'll just start by asking if anybody here recognize or know where this picture is of.
It's not Sacramento.
No, no, not Sacramento.
The,
So
what's
that's-
behind you? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
this picture
Oh.
on the first page, what is that? Where is that?
Oh, you're not sharing your screen, Vic.
Oh, I'm not sharing? Oh, I thought I was sharing already. Okay. Okay, that's right. We stopped sharing for a moment. I'm trying to see where that page was that was allowing me to share. I can't get to that now.
It should be down at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's-
If you scroll your cursor down, you should see share screen in green at the bottom, the middle of the bottom.
Sort of disappeared on me. Sorry about that. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, can you see it now?
Not yet.
Sorry, everyone, we had this tested earlier.
Here we go.
You see it?
Yes. Got it.
Okay. Okay, now do you recognize the picture?
The
Where does it-
Colorado River.
Yeah, it's good. That's actually Lake Mead.
Lake-
And that's Hoover Dam that's holding back Lake Mead. This is a picture showing the conditions that you can see here that on the river, you see these white bathtub rings here. Let me use my pointer so you can, these are the bathtub rings that you see, this white here. That actually shows the drought that we are experiencing on the river over the past 20 years. The river has been in a drought for, a decline since 1999, 2000. Back then, the reservoir was full at about 95% capacity. And this river is significant because, or this lake is significant because it's able to store 25 million acre feet. Just to give you an idea of how large that is, 1 acre foot is basically the size of a football field, 1 foot deep. And so just imagine, 25 million football field, that's how much volume we're talking about, the capacity of this. And so now the storage of this river now is down all the way down to like a little bit less than 30% of capacity. So from 1999, 2000 until the present, that's how much water has been declining at Lake Mead. So I just wanted to kind of give you a feel for what the drought has done to the lake, and it's important in Southern California because that's where you get a good chunk of your water supply from. The Colorado River, you get also from the State Water Project. That's the State Water Project is the project that my department maintain, operates, and manage. And we also did the design and construction of that project. And if you're driving up to, on I-5 up to Northern California, you probably saw that aqueduct. It's like around several hundred miles long and a system of dams, reservoirs, and so on. Okay, so I will, and I'll make this interactive. Feel free to interrupt me and ask questions, and perhaps somebody can help monitor the chat if you have a question. Okay, next slide. I have to do all this myself too. So I have a couple of introductory slides, and I'll go through some of that to give you a better background of what we're talking about. This is a pretty much a graphic of how dry the West is. Basically, this is the 100th meridian line. This is the imaginary line going from North to South Pole, and to the east of that, we get more than, on average, more than 20 inches of precipitation a year. And to the west of that, you can see how the red colors, that's means not good. That means it's very dry, much less than 20%. Some of these, bluer, cool colors are better. So you can see overall in the west, you got pockets of snowpack, pretty much. That's a way to describe this. These are, the northwest, that's where Washington State is. You got some good, precipitation here that goes to Columbia River. And then here is where the Sierra snowpack is. You got the northern, middle, and southern Sierra. Southern Sierra is where the LA aqueduct supplies water to Southern California from pretty much the Eastern Sierras here. And in the Northern Sierra, that's where the State Water Project gets a lot of their water. And that runoff that goes into our reservoirs from that. And also some other big areas of snowpack is in the Rocky Mountains, in the Colorado River here, in this state of Colorado here. And that goes, the runoff goes into, Colorado River, as you know, and I'll have a map that actually depicts that a little bit better. Interesting to note that I think 80% or 70% to 80% of the population of the US lives east of this line here. And also I wanted to show how diverse, the US here is diverse, not only in precipitation, but also in, pretty much sociology, economy, culture, etc. And so this is an example of a picture of Cody, Wyoming, which is in the western part of Wyoming. And you can see horses and sort of a cowboy here. And then you compare that to a place like LA, where we have a much bigger economy of like 3 trillion, 6th largest in the world. And our economy in Southern California is made of tourism, agriculture, NBA, Hollywood, et cetera. And then to the north, you got Silicon Valley here. So it's pretty diverse, the state that we live in. So next slide here. This here shows a graphic of the federal land ownership in the US. And you can see here, in the West, there's lots of federal land ownership. These are pretty much managed by the Bureau of Land Management. A lot of that is also US Forest Service. But you have states like Nevada, which is like 80 or 90%, federal land. And that's important. I just wanted to illustrate that because, open space, public lands, you can do a lot of things on that, like energy development, recreation. But, as it applies to us, we're talking about water development. So there's been a lot of dams, built by the US Bureau of Reclamation over the past, decades here. So that's just something to keep in mind about federal land and open space. And feel free to ask me any questions. Another introductory slide is that, in the 1860s, Mr. John Powell led some expeditions to explore the Rocky Mountains and the Colorado River. And I think they were looking for, where's a good place to dam up. And in general, I think what they like nowadays, I don't know if they knew this back then, but nowadays you want to look for good foundation materials to build your dam on, and also probably a narrow space so that you don't have to build a lot of structure, a lot of concrete. People were moving westward back in the 1800s, gold rush and many other factors. The Homestead Act of 1862, spurred economic development, and the government gave, farmers like 160 acres each if they were to irrigate their land. And a lot of people were moving westward, and millions of acres were given to federal land were given to farmers to farm. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of water use now, because in the West, there's a law called first in time, first in use, or first in time, first in right. So in other words, if you like Mr. Thomas Blythe, who the city of Blythe was named after, you planted that, a stake, you put a stake in the river and you were using that water back in the 1870s, you have a senior right to that water. And you use that water based on beneficial use and consumptive use. So in other words, for whatever reasons you need, however much water you need to farm your farm. And so that, some farmers have that use it or lose it mentality. And so that's why sometimes you see farmers do that, but now we're getting a lot more efficient in how we farm, and with drip irrigation and all that, things are improving to make us more water efficient. Also in 1902, a lot of the farmers, they were privatizing, they were private. And so, not a lot of them succeeded. And so I think the government recognized that, they want to improve that system. And so the Reclamation Act of 1902 allowed for federal investments in major water development projects. In the Southern California, you had the Coachella Canal. I think that was part of that. That became up later, but also the Imperial Irrigation District Canal for IED, that was part of that process. And then throughout the years, 340 dams were constructed by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation in 17 Western states. Also during the 1930s, you had the Great Depression in the early 30s, and in 1929 you had the stock market crash too. So, anytime you talk about water development and construction projects, large construction projects that creates hundreds or thousands of jobs, that was always very good to hear about. And so, there was acts that was made in 1928 of the Boulder Canyon Project Act that allowed for the subsequent construction of Hoover Dam. And then also another reason people were moving westward was the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. Dirty 30s was what they call that. And a lot of people, good amount of people left Oklahoma. They were called Okies, and there was a John Steinbeck movie or novel, The Grapes of Wrath, that was based on this story here. People were just leaving, going west. And here's a picture of what kind of dust storm they were experiencing. And that was also during very drought years in the 30s. And so, that made things pretty dry, and, with gusts, all that blew up and really turned off a lot of people. Okay, so next slide is kind of give you an overview of the Colorado River Basin, and I'll do the same for the state of California side. But I was mentioning that in the Colorado River Basin, you have the Colorado Front Range. And this, in the Front Range, it's similar to in California, where you might have heard about, North and the fighting each other, North and South fighting each other, because, Northern folks sometimes say, why are the Southern folks getting our water, And, sometimes people say money or water flows where the money goes. But the reality is a lot of the population in California, they live up in the Southern California part, but a lot of the rainfall is in the north. That's why we have that State Water Project. And the federal government, they have the Central Valley Project as well to transfer that water down to where most of the folks live. And in Colorado, state of Colorado, they have a similar, east slope versus west slope kind of, tussle that they sometimes fight, sometimes among each other. But here, the Colorado River, it starts in the Rocky Mountains. That's where the headwater of the river is, and it flows. Let me use my pointer here. So that's near Boulder and Denver area, and it flows down here. You can see my pointer, hopefully. And that's where the river goes. It goes to Glen Canyon Dam. And that's the other major dam on the Colorado River system. And that's Glen Canyon Dam that holds back Lake Powell, which is another approximately 25 million acre foot reservoir. So, the system in Colorado River, you might have heard that it's resilient because of its large amount of storage that it can capture. And so basically, even in dry years, you still have a lot of storage, hopefully. But even during wet years, you're able to capture a lot of water when you do have that ability to. And it goes down to Hoover Dam. Another large source of inflow is the Green River, which headwaters starts in like Wyoming area. And so in some years when the Colorado River system is normal, sometimes I remember the Green River back a few years ago when the Colorado River system was not that great, but the Green River was like 200% of average. And so that really saved the whole system. And also in the upper basin states, there's like another 10 million acre feet of storage. And so in the whole system, there's around 60 million acre feet of storage. And as I told you before, 1 acre foot is like a football field, 1 foot deep. So just imagine if you can get an understanding of how large that is. Very large number. Okay, and then here the river comes down here again, and this border here, it borders Arizona and California, and that's the river, and it goes to Mexico. And so in Mexico, use about 1.5 million acre feet a year. The U.S. government has a treaty with Mexico to provide that 1.5 million acre feet a year, and they have a pretty senior right because federal or international treaty is a, you know, senior to like, I think even senior to like Native, you know, American, who's been around for a long time too. And so it goes to Mexicali in Mexico, and Mexico used that to farm Mexicali. You get some of your fruits from there and vegetables from there. And it goes to the Delta here, the Sea of Cortez. And it's worthy to note that it's been like 20 years since that water reached the Sea of Cortez. However, in 2014, there was an experiment done that was called the pulse flow, where they intentionally released 50,000 acre foot to have the water flow into the Delta and see what sprouts up, you know, what kind of you know, creatures come and what kind of plants come about from that you know, experimental flow. And then here you have the Salton Sea, and then you have Metropolitan Water District, and then in your area, in the San Diego County Water Authority, I think it's the wholesale supplier that provides water to the regions here in the local water districts here. As I mentioned, the operation is governed by the law of the river. You know, there's like 16.5 million acre feet annually that's allocated. And unfortunately, you know, the 1922 Colorado River Compact divided the allocations among the upper basin states and the lower basin states equally, but they were using a hydrology based in the 1900s or in the early, you know, 19 to 1920s that was very conservative. And in reality, we're not getting 16.5 million acre feet through the 100+ years of hydrologic record that we have. It's more like around 13.5 to 14 million acre feet. And so sometimes you might have heard the term that the system on the Colorado River is over allocated. That's what they mean, because the supply doesn't quite meet the demand, but you know, because of conservation programs and a lot of things that they're doing, you know, to try to make up that difference. And the other thing is the upper basin states are allowed 7.5 million acre feet, but they haven't used up all that yet. And so for a long time, California, you know, for a long time, we were able to benefit because they haven't been developed yet, but they're starting to develop more. And so they, at one day, they might be using up their 7.5 million acre feet. As I mentioned, 60 million acre feet capacity. You know, the large dams are able to produce hydropower. They've got 4,200 megawatts. And then 70% of the water is used for agriculture. And I explained to you the reason why, because, you know, most of the folks who came westward were farmers. They were growing and irrigating. 40% of the water is also exported outside of the basin, meaning this is the basin in black. And so a lot of the water use goes outside the basin to places like California, LA, you know, Imperial Valley. Imperial Valley, as you know, is a large farming area, and they're most you know, significant user of Colorado River. They use about 2.5 million acre feet per year. And so just imagine about 7.5 million acre feet allocated to the lower basin states of California, Arizona, and Nevada. But yet that one single user in California uses 1/3 of that. And I mentioned the post-flow event earlier. Feel free to ask me questions. If I'm going too fast, let me know. I can always repeat myself or slow down. But I think, you know, I have 22 slides, so I'm trying to get to that as well. Okay, so California here, a little bit more details. You were asking, where does our water come from? And I mentioned earlier the LA Aqueduct. That's Mr. Al Mulholland, the city engineer, I believe, who helped to find this aqueduct and design it. He, unfortunately, I think he passed away a very unhappy man because have you heard of the St. Francis Dam failure in Ventura County? That dam failed in 1929, and that because of its failure, it helped create the Division of Safety of Dams. That's the regulatory body of the Department of Water Resources, where they regulate, you know, new dam construction, alterations, modifications. And then he was saddened, and I think you know, he was very unhappy about that. The day before the dam failed, he went out to inspect the dam, and he said, "This dam is fine." And soon after that, the dam failed, and you know, 400 or 500 people downstream passed away. It was in the middle of the night, and I think there was a lot of migrants who were living in the valley downstream there who also unfortunately passed away. So Colorado River Aqueduct, I mentioned that. That's from Lake Havasu. This is the intake structure where they pump water from Lake Havasu. And then here in your pink, here is your All-American Canal that brings water to Imperial Valley, and then up on the Coachella Canal that brings water up to the Coachella Valley. And you folks are not too far in the San Diego area. And then the Colorado River Aqueduct also has the San Diego aqueducts, and also this Tijuana, this transports water to the San Diego area. And then here in purple is the State Water Project. This is State Water Project, I'm sorry, the green here. And then the green here actually extends all the way to the South Delta here. And then in purple is actually the federal project, Central Valley Project is what they call that. And here's some details. There's a lot of talk about, the Delta tunnels that you might be hearing about. There's an EIR that was just released on that project not too long ago, a draft EIR. Basically, in the past, they were talking about we got to renovate and modernize the infrastructure to bring water from the north to Southern California, and that Delta tunnel project is a big component to make all that happen because of the potential for earthquakes or other things that can really disrupt the system. So imagine something like a natural hazard event, and that interferes and interrupts your delivery, and Southern California doesn't get any water. So that's something they've been talking about for a long time. Hopefully they'll make some more inroads on that and move that towards construction. Okay, and here Southern California imported water mainly from the Colorado River and the Sierras. And it's important to note in Southern California, about 1/3 of your supplies is from the Colorado River, about another third is from the State Water Project, and about 1/3 is from local water development, like your desalinization project in Carlsbad, like pure water recycling projects in San Diego. San Diego has a pure water project, and many other projects like that are. I'm sorry, does someone have a question?
No, there was background noise. I fixed it.
Okay.
Actually, I think some questions are going in the chat.
Sure.
Is anybody going to monitor the chat for our speaker?
Just ask your question.
All right. I do have a question on the upper Colorado River region. What happens if the upper basin water rights holders decide to use the full amount of their water rights?
Well, legally they can use up to 7. The whole upper basin states comprise of Wyoming, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. And legally they can use up to 7.5 million acre feet because that was how much water they were allocated, in the Colorado River Compact, which happened in 1922. And actually that's 100 years ago. And they have a big, symposium and event commemorating the signing of that document. So that could happen. I think your question was what happens if they use all that amount?
Right. What happens to us if they use all that amount?
Yeah, I think we're pretty much staying within the 7.5 million acre feet. As far as I know, the water accounting shows a lot that provides those details on how much California is using. Metropolitan for California were given like about 550,000 acre feet from the 1931 7 Basin States Agreement, and Palo Verde Irrigation District got the top priority, and they on average use about 800,000 acre feet. The second one was I think IID, and so it's got all that listed out. Coachella is up there as well.
Mr. Wynn, we've been noticing that you were telling us that the dams have been not full. They've been dropping in volume for over 20 years.
Right.
That's without the northern basin using all their supply. So I'm trying to figure out what would happen if they just said, okay, we're going to use that.
Right. Well, hopefully that's what they're doing right now is negotiating and trying to collaborate so that they don't put any one state hopefully won't go through too much lack of water, but and the Bureau of Commissioner is basically saying the basin states have to come up with agreements to come up with new water or conserve their water, living within their means. If they don't, then the Bureau could intervene and dictate how the basin states get their water. And so, that could be one scenario where the reclamation, the Department of Interior, will come in there and dictate how people use their water. And they've used that as a threat before to have basin states come up with side agreements to make that work. And there's lots of things that I think they're talking right now. I'm not privy to those negotiations anymore, but they're discussing. There's water investments among each other. There's trade that they're trying to do, and conservations that they want to do. They're paying. The federal government has that that infrastructure investment act that they just came out, and I think a lot of that water will be used to help pay farmers to fallow their lands, and so they're doing things to conserve water so that the system doesn't crash any more than it is. I'm not sure that is directly answering your question, but that's the way to avoid that from happening. But the states are still continuing. Utah propose a pipeline from St. John's to another part of the state. And those projects are still being proposed, but they take long time to actually implement. So we're still waiting and see what's going to happen. And during all this wait and see, we hope that we get some Noah's Ark and the river system is replenished again, and that we don't have to worry about that. The system is pretty resilient with 60 million acre feet of capacity. There's storage that are pretty near full in the upper basin states, like about 80% or so. Last I checked. They've talked about re-reservoir operations. So in other words, moving some of that water around so that they'll protect Lake Powell downstream of that.
So,
good question. Yeah.
How many places are doing this pipeline you mentioned in Utah? Are there other states doing that?
Yeah, there was also, and I'm just going back maybe a few years back. San Juan in New Mexico had something. I forget what the name of the project was, but it was a pipeline project that the U.S. Bureau, part of their program, to bring water from one location to another location within state of Mexico. So there's always something coming up.
But that's not many states, that's just 2 areas. So there's no above ground transit, high-speed train like we did during post-World War II, where they did all the highway systems so people could also move military around if we had to.
Not that I'm aware of like that scale. Good questions. Okay, do I have to do a time check or we're okay with time?
Please keep going.
Okay, I better go quickly. So this is a picture of the unregulated inflow into Lake Powell. And I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of storage back in the early 90s, but you're seeing a trend that it's been, you're seeing a trend that it's been going down. This bar shows the storage at, the combined storage at Powell and Meade and the percent capacity. And we're at about 32% right now. And next year, their forecast is La Nina conditions, which basically mean drier and warmer conditions. And so that's not really good news for us to hear, because you kind of want wetter and colder, because if it's colder, then it falls as snowpack, as snow. Drier, water precipitation can fall as water, and you want to be able to have the snowpack there so that in the spring, when the temperature heats up, the runoff occurs, and then you'll have, your reservoirs will be filled so that you'll have water during the summer. That's going to last you until the end of the water year, which is the end of September. And then they go through that whole water cycle again. The water year is between October 1st and September 30th. And it's important for their accounting. Okay, it just shows you here's another picture of California. It shows you the variability of the annual runoff. And so, in some years we have 10 inches of runoff. It can go up to 15 inches. And in 1930s, as I mentioned earlier, it was a pretty, drought period, drought years, and it picked up. And more recently, from 2000 or late 90s down to 2020, you've been seeing this decline in the average annual runoff. And so, that just means that we have less water going into our reservoirs. And so one of the, I'll just jump ahead, one of the governor's strategy is to build more storage. And so that's important so that in times of wet years, when we do have storage, we don't just lose that water and it flows out towards the ocean, but we're able to capture that water if we had additional storage. So the Colorado River Basin is unique in that it has a lot of storage, but on the California side, we don't have as much storage. And so that's some of the proposal being, they've talked about this in the past, but that's some of the proposal now is to build in Sites Reservoir, which is in Northern California. But you can see here the very, that's our climate. It's very highly variable in temperatures and in flows. And just to give you an example, if you remember in the last water year in October, we had a pretty good water year. It was raining a lot. And then in December, we had a great water month there. But then January 2022 came around and it was dry and warm for like 3 months, January, February, March. And so it just shows you the highly variable hydrology that we live in the state of California. Okay, so another graphic of the drought monitor. You might have heard about this here. This is a drought monitor of the West. And you see the West, the settlers who came to settle here used to call the West the Great American Desert. There's a lot of desert there. But here in California here, and there's a lot of desert in the San Bernardino area here as well. But you can see this dark brown color is exceptional drought. And then, that's just a little bit north of LA here, but pretty much the part of the Central Valley is pretty dry. And that's not very helpful that the farmers were pumping a lot during drought years until like 2014, when the new state law on Sustainable Groundwater Management Act came about to kind of, force people to make sure they live within their means and be able to just keep the groundwater basins in balance. And so groundwater sustainability agencies have to come up with these groundwater sustainability plans to show how they're going to balance their basins. Next slide is in California itself. We've had precipitation to date from October 1st to September 30th. And you can see here, we're pretty dry, particularly in the Southern California here. We're about 25 to 70% of average. And I think the statewide average is like around 73%. Here's a picture of the Northern Sierra, 8-station index. These are the 8 stations where these measurements are taken. And in the 1976-77 was the second driest year. And currently we're about pretty dry as well. We're below the average from 1991 to 20. And as I said earlier, next year could be another dry year. So, water, there's only so much water. So what is the state response? And hopefully I'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, next slide. This is a picture of our reservoir conditions as of September 11th. And some of the big ones are Shasta Reservoir, which holds about, my mouse stopped there, which holds about 4,500 acre feet. The blue line is where we're at right now. They're at 34% capacity. Oroville is at about 36% capacity. And so overall, this is just, imagine this is like your bank account, for example, and you're kind of low in your bank account. You don't know what your budget will be like next year. It's just whatever nature gives us, right? So that's why we got to take a bunch of different actions. And in the year 2020, the California Natural Resources Agency released the Water Supply Resilience Report, which lay out all the different portfolio approach to increase your water supply and conserve as well. And we subsequently came up with in August 2022, this year, last month, a water supply strategy, which kind of hones in on 4 strategies from that 2020 report, and I'll provide that a little bit later on. But you can see it's kind of critical now. We're at critical elevations, and so one way would be to ask people to fallow their farms. There's a bunch of different conservation programs. Turf removal is a big one in LA County. Metropolitan, in the years past had, allocated, hundreds of millions of dollars to help pay folks to remove their turf. Okay, next slide. Change is happening. We're seeing that things are, temperature have been increasing. And so, as I said earlier, if it's hot, people tend to use more water, and it changes your precipitation pattern as well. In the past, we used to have peak snowpack used to occur in April 1st, but now that's been shifted in recent years to early March. And so the peak snowpack, that changed that by a few weeks. So where are we now? There's been a few proclamations, drought emergencies, executive orders made over the past couple years. These are some of the dates that were made on these executive orders, and the most recent one was in March of 2022. Now all 58 counties are covered by the state proclamations, meaning that they could apply for assistance, and also certain projects could be expedited. Counties are also covered by USDA, Department of Ag, drought disaster designations. This was, I think this was probably in Oroville here, where the picture was taken. So state response actions, they installed a salinity barrier in the Delta, so that pretty much slows the movement of salt water into the central and south Delta, because the regulatory body requires that we got to release water to kind of push the salinity intrusion. Salinity is not good for farming, and not good for your irrigation infrastructure, because they can get corrosion, and farming that impacts your crops. And so a lot of that water doesn't really get lost. It goes to the Delta, and it on years that we have surplus, they go into the Delta. And also we have to release water for the Delta purpose. But there's been a lot of actions by the water board to basically allow temporary measures like these temporary salinity measures to slow the movement of water, salt water into the Delta. There was a budget of $5.2 billion passed in over 3 years. I think this was from the 21-22 fiscal year, and then this year I understand there's another $2.8 billion for drought resiliency and water resiliency. And there's funding projects, financial assistance programs. That's what my office does. There's grants. We have grant managers that manages grants, and local agencies and others, they apply to get financial assistance to make their system more drought resilient. And our office staff, the Department of Water Resources, we have a whole section of grant managers to help manage those projects. And a couple of the funding program they have are for droughts. One was the Small Community Drought Relief Program, focusing on smaller rural communities, disadvantaged communities. And the other one was for urban multi-benefit drought program. And I understand there's funding. That funding continues for those programs this year, and they started like last year. The Water Board, State Water Resource Control Board, also has like $1.3 billion for their long-term drinking water and wastewater resiliency, and to build projects for that. We work pretty closely with the State Water Board on financial assistance and other projects. Other state response, the March 2022 executive order had new orders to ban irrigating turf at CII properties that's on commercial, institution, and irrigation, commercial institution and industrial properties. And so, staff at the Department of Water Resources are talking to, folks in these areas to see how we can conserve water. And I think a lot of that, is to ban the turf removal. And there's calls to ban non-functional turf. That just basically means a turf that has no purpose, for decorative purpose, they should get banned. I'm not sure if we're there yet for banning all, gardens in residential properties, but I think that might be the first to go if we keep on, if next year is dry and the following year is dry again, we'll just have to continue to adjust and adapt and look at what functions can we let go, or what's the one that's best to not provide water to. And there's many different things, among all this, there's many different things that are going on with, water use efficiency, making your toilets more efficient. And so, agriculture are also doing the same to make their system more efficient. And lots of other agencies are investing among each other, like Metropolitan Water District has a fallowing program with Palo Verde Irrigation District to pay their farmers not to fallow, and then the water saved goes to Metropolitan Water District. So there's those type of agreements that's going on, and that one's been on for a while though. Water waste in landscaping is prohibited. So a lot of these are, pretty much common sense as well. I mentioned earlier, the governor declared a drought emergency statewide. There's been funding for drought resiliency and the commitment to human right to water and water equity. So you probably heard the theme water equity quite a lot in this administration, and that just basically means to try to have water accessible to all and to make it equitable and equity for all. So there's been more focus on folks in the past who didn't get the water or didn't have a large water right or have a large ability to access that water. Native American Indians are getting more share of that now, as well as disadvantaged communities and rural communities can fall into that group as well. We have some new data tool to help monitor drought better. There's a new website called California Water Watch. It's water.ca.gov that you can go onto. It's got dashboard of water supply conditions that you can look at. I think down to even the zip code. So you can get a lot of information on precipitation, snowpack, and snowfall, and pretty much everything, all water supply related information on that website. And recommended in the CNRA report to the legislature in the last drought in 2016 and 2016 required this drought monitor. And so that was part of that website here. We did that through that website. Provide easy access to hydrologic data on a watershed scale. We use GIS. And then DWR first application of the graded precipitation and temperature. So pretty much this website encapsulates a lot of these things that we're talking about here to give you a good understanding and easy way to look at water supply in the state and to be able to understand that. So let me get a water, my mouth is drying up. Just do a time check, 54 minutes, okay. So the California Water Supply Strategy, this is the report that just came out in August, and it helps us to adjust to a hotter, drier California. And it's got basically a plan with the time frame of 2030 here, what we hope to get water, where we hope to get new water from, and also a plan by 2040 to total of 4.8 million acre feet of new water from many different components, from increased recycled water. There's been a lot of water that we lose, wastewater. And so this is a plan to kind of do advanced treatment on wastewater, so that you don't lose that water. And I think it's pretty, the process is that rather than doing a secondary treatment, they do another tertiary treatment on the wastewater, and then that gets filtered into groundwater basins or into reservoirs, and that gets further filtered out before it becomes, potable water. And increased desalinization of 28,000 acre feet. There's also proposals to capture, or plans to capture storm water. These are all new water source here, by the way. Increased conservation, that might not be new in that sense, but at least you're saving water. And subtotal for all these is about 1.6, and also expand groundwater, surface water and groundwater supplies. Some of the new storage proposal that I was mentioning earlier. So about a total of 4.8, almost 5 million acre feet by the year 2030. And carrying that forward to the year 2040, we hope to capture 6.9 or create and store 6.9 million acre feet of additional water. And footnote here, storage capacity does not equate to similar volume of new water supply. Okay. So I mentioned earlier the water resilience portfolio, and the water supply strategy is a subset pretty much of the resilience portfolio. Hope to create 4 million acre feet of water during big storms so that you can capture that water in your reservoirs, recycle and reuse water, free up to 500,000 acre feet of water through efficiency and conservation programs, and making new water available through capture and desalinization of ocean water and groundwater basins as well. So all the groundwater basins have brackish groundwater, so there's plans to desalinate that to make it usable water. And to close, drought is a normal part of California's climate. We've had 3 droughts since 2008. We had a drought in 2008, and then that was over, and then we had a drought from 12 to 16, and then we declared that over in 2017, and then we're in a drought now from 2020 to the present. Next year, as I said, is probably likely going to be dry, at least through the winter. We continue to look at the Climate Prediction Center modeling to see what's going to happen. So our climate, we have seen that it's getting hotter and drier. And I explained earlier what type of impact that might have on your precipitation. And I summarized earlier that we need to kind of adapt. We need to adapt to that could mean different things to folks, but here it could mean using less water. And overall, we need to innovate, conserve, store, reuse, and repurpose water. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of the current situation in California, where our water comes from, what's happening with the current drought, and what the state drought response is. And I can take some questions now.
Actually, I have kind of a broad question. Most of our water comes from the Colorado River Basin and from Northern California. And in Northern California, it dumps into the rivers and ends up in the Delta. And then the State Water Project, please tell me if I'm wrong here, kind of takes out of the Delta and brings it south. And all along the way, we've got major population areas and major agricultural areas that have both legal and contractual rights to that water, both along the Colorado River system and the Sacramento and American River systems and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're at the very end, and if we have a limited amount of water and we don't have the kind of cooperation that all of your wonderful information was talking about negotiating, what is to protect us to end up, because we're at the very end, we only get what's left after everybody else has taken out theirs. Is there a contingency for major competition for the water where people don't really cooperate?
That's a scenario just like on the Colorado River Basin, the 7 states, elevating, pretty much you're in a similar situation, but at the larger scale of the states. They're trying to work together so that they don't have that situation. And in your case, I think your supplier is the San Diego County Water Authority. Is that correct?
Mostly,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and then your watershed is at Santa Margarita. and so you probably have a representative on the San Diego County board, right? You have a board member who's on that, who speaks out for your interest. I don't know how your system works, but Metropolitan has, 29 member agencies, or however many they have, and each of them.
We have our own agency, Fallbrook Utility District.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it buys from the San Diego.
Right, and the groundwater as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so that's kind of a water right question, and you are where you are in the totem pole, and with all the conservation programs that's going on, and the investments that we're doing, the state is doing, to pay folks to fallow, for example, so that we have more water available. We hope to avoid a situation where a city just goes dry. But on top of that, the department have been providing what they call like a human. So let me explain. The State Water Project has, a number of contractors that receive water from the State Water Project. Same thing with the Colorado River system. And on the State Water Project system, they get whatever December 1st is the allocation. They get their first allocation, and it depends on their forecast, on the water supply conditions, the reservoir conditions. But in the past, we've only got 5% of their allocation. So in other words, they're getting 5% of what they need or what they want. And so they try to divvy up that amount based on the supplies that they have, so that you get a reasonable amount of water, and you're not getting excess water so that the whole system would crash. So the other thing is the department have been providing a human health and safety allocation to water suppliers, and some water suppliers apply and they have that, and that is basically to provide a water allocation for human health and safety. That's basically sanitation and things like that. And there have been some communities that have gone dry, like in the Coalinga. They had, I read in the news that there were some problems that they've had, and they had water quality problems as well, arsenic, and so they came to the department to seek help, and there's funding programs that they're eligible for, and so I'm pretty sure they're going to get some of that money. And so those have been things like that to mitigate the impacts of what we've been seeing.
Let's see what the questions are that we have in the chat.
Okay, could you read that? Where are we at? Top or?
It's down. It's down at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the next one is Kate Schwartz. Did you want to go ahead and just ask it directly?
Yes, thank you. And your map and graph with the allocations answered my question to some extent, but I was asking about the Shasta Reservoir and how much of California's water needs are met, originating from that Shasta Reservoir.
Yeah, I think I saw on the map or the graphic that depicts how much storage it had. It had like 4 million acre feet or so.
Right.
And most of the water on that system, on the federal Central Valley Project system, I understand is for agriculture.
Right, for
so
the
they're
Central
using
Valley,
that.
correct?
Yeah, a lot of that in the Central Valley, yes.
Okay,
And then there's a joint reservoir, the San Luis Reservoir stores both state and federal water in that reservoir.
Can you stop sharing for a moment while we talk?
Sure. Okay, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Let me look at the screen now.
And then there's a question from Elisa Martin.
Hi there. Yeah, this was partially addressed earlier when we were talking about water rights, but I just wondered if you had kind of your own perspective to share about the status of the conversation between the states trying to reach an agreement. I understand they recently missed their deadline, right? So what is the level of pessimism or optimism out there among water managers about the state's ability to come to an agreement without the feds getting involved. Just be curious what your personal
Yeah.
opinion of that was.
Right. My connections tell me that they're close to reaching an agreement, reaching the amount that they want to reach that would form the agreement. And so for those who don't know, the USBR commissioner wanted the basin states to come together and have an agreement to basically a plan of, a voluntary agreement to save water. They wanted to conserve about 2 to 4 million acre feet of water in that system a year. And they were at 1.7 million acre feet. I think they're, the Secretary of the Department of Interior are giving them a little bit more time until November to reach that agreement. And so they're close. They are, looking at many different ways, and I'm not privy to what those are, but just imagine desalinization could be one, for example, and there would be some kind of agreement, can they just produce more desal water, and then San Diego would take that water and then lay off their amount, or lay off their allocation from the Colorado River. So that would be just some scenarios of what could be happening behind the scenes. But I understand that they're pretty close to reaching, to conserving another few 100,000 acre feet to satisfy the secretaries of the Department of Interior's, demand for saving 2 to 4 million acre feet per year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any mechanical means that would prevent the water from being taken by upstream and up aqueduct users before, so that there is something left for us in the long run? Let's say we have some extraordinary drought and people are not able to get what they agreed to on a reduced basis. Is there any way to make sure, mechanically, that there's water left in the system by the time it gets to us?
Yeah, I think they do their best to do an accounting of who uses that water and how much. And remember, you're asking physically, is there any mechanism? I mean, you really have to live close to the river, or you would have like a large pump in order to pump, water from that river. And so the only folks who can do that are people like in Needles who actually live, close enough so that if they put their pump into the river, then they can pump water that is influenced by the groundwater table from that river. But the Colorado River, they have programs. The USBR has programs where they actually, try to legally give homeowners like a 1 acre foot per year. And 1 acre foot can supply a family of 3 or 4 for like a whole year. And on the Arizona side, I heard that they don't, they've gotten away with that a little bit more than on the California side. But to physically move that water, you're gonna need an infrastructure. So you can't really just come in there and pick a few buckets. That's not going to really make a big difference.
Okay, Elizabeth Stuber has a question.
Yeah, so what happened to tamarisk abatement that was supposed to make a huge difference in the Colorado River Basin? Tamarisk am I getting through?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. I mean, tamarisk is just rampant along the Colorado River and has a huge taproot, like 150 feet foot taproot. It sucks up water like crazy. And there was a movement to get rid of all of that and basically regenerate the water supply for the whole Colorado River Basin by getting rid of the thing that was sucking the water away. What happened to that?
Well, I think that's still on the table. Tamarisk does use up a lot of water, and it's all along the river. It's all along the Salton Sea, the New River and the Alamo River that goes to the border there. There's a lot of tamarisk there as well. And so that's still, I think that's one of the, that's still on the table as a water supply portfolio approach on the Colorado River side. But they have a coalition that, sometimes they have funding to have pilot projects to see if they can quantify how much water is saved from those programs. So I think that's still ongoing, but it's not the biggest, way to save water. I think what you would see a biggest impact from would be the farmers who use 70% of the water and paying them to not farm. And Palo Verde Irrigation District, who's the #1 priority on the river, Colorado River, last year, they took advantage of a federal investment, federal funding program where they were able to, their board voted to, take that program, accept that program, and I think the farmers were getting $925 per acre foot. And so why wouldn't you want to, take advantage of that program?
But
Because
why would we want to pay farmers not to grow food?
I agree with that.
that's the other significant, that's the other big impact.
Elizabeth
That's
is
gonna,
talk-
yeah.
Elizabeth is talking about water that's just growing weeds.
Yes. And
Right.
as far as I'm concerned, if we can encourage farmers to conserve or to use a drip system instead of a spray or whatever that requires. But if we encourage farmers not to farm, what are we all going to eat?
Yeah, that's
That makes no sense to me.
unfortunately that I have no control over the market conditions and what the farmers do, but those things happen. I'm not entirely happy about the supply chain and the impacts it does to us and inflation and all that stuff, but it does happen. A lot of us here are probably just wondering the same thing, like, well, that's not a brilliant move because now you don't have farming and you don't have jobs. And a lot of the products, alfalfa that's grown, that gets exported as well. But those things do happen. Market conditions dictate that. Sometimes we don't have any control over that.
And I'm pretty sure that in that last beautiful photograph you had up there, the plant in the foreground was a tamarisk. Just,
Yeah. I didn't notice that.
I think it is.
Good eyes. Yeah.
Tim Bilash has a question.
Sure.
Thanks for your talk. I apologize for not seeing the first part. I hope we'll get a link that I can watch that when it's ready. You stimulated a lot of thoughts in my mind, but I'll just mention two. I go to a number of the Sandag meetings about transportation in particular, but there seems to be plans to move another 500,000 people into the region. And there isn't as much talk about the water that everybody uses, particularly the commercial waters for a lot of the industrial commercial people. So I just wanted to mention, I think 500,000 people put an increased demand on water needs. I live up, as a secondary thing, I live up on the hill in the San Diego inlet. And the water comes down and it's liquefying the soil. And so some of the houses are falling down. The coast was falling down near the railroad. And they put in some drainage things. And so the water now is draining directly into the San Diego River and then going out to the ocean. And I haven't heard much talking about areas that this water, because it comes so suddenly, could be reclaimed. I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that as well, but if it's, representative water agencies are aware of that, they can certainly try to take advantage of the funding programs that the state might have, or even the federal government might have, to see if they can build some kind of a project or to, if there's any damage or if there's any mitigation that they could do, those things are potentially available.
Yeah, I'd appreciate a contact for you, but I hear him talking about putting in more housing. I don't hear him talking about making water available.
Yeah, I thought there were some requirements from your, I don't know who's from, but water agencies or whoever, but if developers want to build homes, then they have to show that there's a, supply of water available for so many years. Did anyone hear that? Something like that?
But there's a math formula for showing lots of water and no need. We always see that on the environmental impact studies, that there's lots and lots of water that really isn't there.
Yeah, politics gets involved and invents more water and less need.
Yeah. Well, San Diego has their San Vicente dam raise, and that I think created like a couple 100,000 acre feet of storage, and I'm not sure who that water belonged to. I think maybe the city of San Diego, but I'm not too familiar with all the water storage projects in San Diego area, but there's some plans like that, and you know, that has helped out with potentially having more additional storage. Actually, I might also say that Diamond Valley Reservoir was built not, you know, a few years in the back, that Metropolitan was able to store, you know, a few 100,000 acre-feet in their system. So when they do have excess water from either the State Water Project or Colorado River Aqueduct, they can move that water and store that at, you know, Diamond Valley. And
Let's take one more question from Kate.
sure.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Vic, for your presentation. I wondered if you had heard about some of the proposed private projects in the Coachella Valley. Disney has proposed a gigantic new housing community in Rancho Mirage that will include building a new man-made lake for water sports here in the desert. And they're also considering 3 new water surf parks throughout the Coachella Valley to attract, you know, more tourism.
Yes, I think you're referring to that North Lake project over in the Riverside County area. I have heard about that. I don't know if, I think they're doing studies on that right now at this stage. And then, you know, you can always follow the federal legislation or state legislation to see, you know, what projects get funding or not. And I think, you know, the folks who are advocating for this project, I'm pretty sure they're trying to, you know, get some kind of funding from the state for this project.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, the demand that the residents conserve more and more water is also, you know, being enforced now, and the water costs are going up dramatically for the residents while they're also, you know, entertaining these project ideas.
Right, and then, you know, maybe one day when the system is replenished again, then you can probably, you know, these projects might, you know, come to fruition, or more likely to come to fruition.
Do you see the system being replenished, Mr. Nguyen?
It will take several good years of above normal precipitation to bring that up a little bit better, but, you know, we don't know what's in store for us. We haven't been able to you know, create water through weather modification yet. We can't really control the weather. There's you know, we do studies with Caltech, with Scripps in San Diego to, you know, we have funding or research programs with them to, you know, improve the forecast. You know, we can forecast weather pretty well between 7, you know, 14 days. You know, we have a pretty good accuracy on that, but beyond 14 days is not very accurate, just because the, you know, chaotic nature of weather is hard to predict. But there's been some success, and you know, next year it could be dry. Who knows what's the 5th year? You know, but we have to plan for a potentially dry 5th year as well. So we just kind of work with whatever we're able to work with, and so that governor's plan shows new water, because we don't want, we're talking about new water. We're not talking about, you know, we don't want to conserve water and be able to save 1 million acre-feet by conserving water. We've got to create new water. And so that's kind of the bottom line, is to, you know, innovate, create, conserve, store water, repurpose, reuse water.
Okay.
I think with that, we're already about 15 minutes after our time. So really good questions. And thank you so much, Vic. Great presentation. And thank you everybody for hanging out with us. I think we had one final comment in the chat from Tim, but we'll follow up with you afterwards, Tim, about a sustainable farm you visited. So we'll get with you on that. But Vic, thank you once again. We appreciate your time and all of your information.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now. Have a good evening.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.